going on, everyone? It is Friday, November 15th, 2019, and you are currently tuning into the Five Starr Wrestling Report review series. This is the 14th installment, I believe, and this is also week 7 of the Wednesday Night Wars. If you are tuning into the show for the first time, welcome aboard. This is the YouTube show where each week we have 2 uploads going over wrestling news topics and weekend event discussions, as well as recaps of NWA Powerrr, AEW Dynamite, and NXT. If you have not done so already, make sure you subscribe and keep posted with this channel each week for our 2 new uploads. We have a Monday edition, which is the news coverage portion of this channel, and Friday's edition, which is the review series portion. Also, make sure you comment and rate this video so that I can get your feedback regarding the content discussed here. It would be great to hear from everyone and get some varying opinions on the content from all 3 of these shows. There is a lot of variety with each program, which makes these shows pretty enjoyable to watch for the most part. With that said, let's get going here. As per usual with the review series, if you've been keeping posted each week, we will start with NWA Powerrr from Tuesday. This is NWA Powerrr episode 6. We begin the show with an interview from the Rock and Roll Express. They talk about how exciting it is to be back in the NWA. Ricky spends a few seconds putting over Outlaw Inc., says he's excited that they have the opportunity to compete for the NWA Tag Team Championships, even going so as far as to say that he's happy for Kingston and, well, the other guy on the team. Poor Homicide. This eventually brings out Kingston and Homicide, and Eddie essentially says that with the back support of Ricky and Robert, there's no way that Outlaw Inc. are losing in the main event. And, they did such a great job teasing the idea that Outlaw Inc. were going to win the championships, you pretty much already knew how the main event was going to go down. Trevor Murdoch versus Caleb Conley. They had a fun big guy versus little guy match, I thought. Trevor took control with some body slams early on. Caleb made a small comeback at the end. Went for a springboard moonsault, but Trevor got the knees up. And then Trevor plants Caleb with the half Nelson slam and then follows up with a top rope bulldog for the 3. Not a whole lot else to say about it. I still don't think Trevor Murdoch is anything special, and I think he would benefit from maybe hitting a treadmill a few times a week. Perhaps investing in some kind of keto diet. That said, he's got the gritty old school Southern feel that kind of fits the mold of the NWA product, so he's definitely a fit, just not in the old school context. We had Aaron Stevens come out for a promo. He begins to announce his departure from NWA and his retirement from professional wrestling altogether. The crowd is chanting, "Hey, hey, goodbye" at him. He informs us that he is going to confirm a role in his upcoming film, Shogun of Malibu, and will never return to the NWA again. Which, yes, everyone, just to confirm, Aaron Stevens does very much facially resemble Richard Chamberlain. And, that's pretty much it. After 4 consecutive losses in his return to pro wrestling, 3 of which came at the hands of Ricky Starks in 2 consecutive weeks, I believe, Aaron Stevens has presumably chosen the Hollywood path after all. Quite depressing, but perhaps a better fit. In a match whose names I am not making up here, Crystal Rose and Brooklyn Creed versus Marty Bell and Thunder Rosa, both of whom were sporting the Zack Ryder half-trunk, half-pant attire. 30 seconds into the match, we are informed by Jim Cornette that there's no sense in trying to confirm why Marty turned on Allison Kay last week because, and this is almost a direct quote here, I'm not making this up, women do not like talking to each other. So I'm sure Jim will be hearing about that from the Social Justice Warrior clan pretty soon. Anyway, here's what we learned in this match, aside from the brief stuff I just mentioned. Thunder Rosa has a sick-looking double foot stomp finisher, and she's apparently the only female talent that Jim Cornette sees any potential in. The heels win in like a minute and a half. Afterwards, Marty Bell proceeds to cut a promo with Marquez, completely out of breath, by the way, despite having maybe 30 seconds of offense in the previous match. And she basically says that she did not know Thunder Rosa personally before, but now she does not care about her past. She only cares about her future. And Thunder Rosa is apparently said future. And then Rosa said a few things in Spanish, none of which I could really comprehend, despite taking 3 courses in Spanish in school. And then I heard the English translation from Marty, and I can confirm that I still had no idea what the hell she was talking about. Something about a vision of a woman, something about an inextinguishable fire, and that Allison Kay has no idea what's coming to her. All I know is that there's an incredibly great point during this interview where David Marquez just subtly looks at the camera just to let us, the viewers, know how strange this promo is. And, well, it was weird. Weirder than Brandy Rhodes performing witchcraft spells with Awesome Kong? Probably not. But very awkward couple of minutes of TV to watch? Yeah, I would say that. We had a brief James Storm backstage promo following his match with Colt Cabana last week. Says that he was robbed of the NWA national title, but he's got bigger fish to fry now. Says he's not going after the smaller tadpoles and ponds. He wants to go after the killer whale in the form of Nick Aldis and the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. And the next time that Storm finds Aldis, his butt is his. Yeah, James Storm is pretty great, folks. Nothing new to report there. We had Colt Cabana come out for an interview, speaking of such. Says that he's excited to be the new national champion. Talks about Storm taking advantage of him in their previous match to win the championship, but Cabana healed himself up, rehabbed his bad leg, and fought hard to win back the national title. This eventually brought out Ricky Starks to pace around Colt. Anyway, Colt tries to keep talking about Storm, but loses his train of thought midway through. Tells Ricky he's not sure what he's doing out here. And then Ricky Starks basically informs us that he is sold on gold. Another very bizarre way to introduce a new program, but hey, I'll give it this. At least there seems to be some kind of progression with guys on the card. You know, Ricky at least has credentials to go after a title now, what with having multiple victories over the span of several weeks. Can't say that I was a particular fan of the way they introduced the program, but it's at least logical. Dan Parker versus the Question Mark. Again, a name that I kid you not. And also a man that may or may not have stolen Jerry Lawler's ring attire. So 5 seconds into this match, the Question Mark is already the third most over guy in the company, probably behind Tim Storm and Nick Aldis. They had a very, very brief exchange. And then Question Mark delivers what my notes read as an upward thrust to Parker, who takes a bump landing directly on the back of his head, which leads to Mark picking up the 3. And as I also wrote down here, if this were WCW in 2000, they would have probably blown this character off immediately by revealing who was under the mask, but because this show is run by semi-competent people with a clue, they kept the mystique of the character, which is what makes him so great. So, thumbs up there. We had a video promo for Thunder Rosa in the Cage, which basically looked like a teaser of Rosa entering some kind of part-time role into MMA. Looked like a cool promo. Granted, it was a little weird in hindsight, considering that Rosa is supposed to be playing this demonic-like heel on Powerrr, yet this video portrayed her as a babyface. It was just kind of a weird crossover. But, you know, hopefully it works out for her. The MMA thing, that is. It didn't go so well for Punk, but who knows, maybe Rosa will pick it up quicker. Eli Drake came out to do a promo. Says that there's a lot of questions going on with why Camille is keeping her mouth shut lately. Says that Nick Aldis has a very tight cap on her because if Camille were to come out and spill the beans, she would admit that there's one man who's the biggest threat to Nick Aldis in his world title right now. To which, in the greatest moment of the show, there is a single fan in the crowd that just screams out, "Josephus!" I laughed at this. So, the fans end up starting a question mark chant, again informing us that after one single TV appearance, the question mark is more over than like 90% of the guys on this show right now. Again, possibly discounting Tim Storm and Nick Aldis. Then he says that the only name on Camille's mind is Eli Drake. So, well, then this segment got, again, for lack of better terms here, weird. Latimer and Isaacs come out, and Latimer basically threatens Eli Drake to mind his own business and keep his mouth shut. Drake tries to say that this has nothing to do with him, but Latimer confirms that it does have something to do with him, which, well, for anyone that watched TNA years ago, know that Nick Aldis and Thomas Latimer are, well, close, shall we say. So they leave, and this is followed by Mr. Anderson coming out and telling Drake that if Drake is looking for someone with a big mouth, all he has to do is utter the name Anderson. And, well, here's what I wrote down to conclude this segment. If you watch this show on YouTube, pause the video at the 31 minute and 3 second mark. The faces of both Eli Drake and David Marquez at this point confirm my facial expression by the end of this skit. In fact, if I can screenshot it on my computer, I will post it as a graphic for this video. This was quite the experience. And then my spirits were lifted because, ladies and gentlemen, we were introduced to the newest Tony Falk advertisement. We were introduced to Tony Falk Wrestling Farm, wherein the sole goal of this industry is to grow baby faces and heels. And for only $15,000, we can purchase our own heel and or baby face. And all you have to do is call the number 555-123-4567. And just to confirm that number, it is 555-765-4321. Absolutely died. I'll say this real briefly. These NWA inset commercials are not always home runs, but Austin Idol and Tony Falk usually come up with some pretty entertaining stuff. I know not everyone's a big fan of these comedy skits, but truth be told, in comparison to a lot of the stuff I saw in this week's program, this inset promo was a must for this week. Then we had Nick Aldis come out for a promo. Says that he hears a lot of people come out and talk about what they deserve. Says that he's here to remind everyone that this business, NWA, or the people owe nobody anything. Talks about presenting Dory Funk Jr. with the Lou Thez Award. Talks about standing side by side with Harley Race to present the NWA World Title. Says that he's earned everything he's accomplished and that the reason NWA is where it's at right now is because of him. And he concludes by saying that he's going to sit ringside for the upcoming tag match to ensure that there's no funny business or shenanigans. Coded language for any of you casual viewers out there. And in our main event, Outlaw Inc. versus the Wild Cards for the NWA Tag Team Championships. They had a pretty good little main event tag match here. Faces took control early on. Brief heat cutoff to work over Homicide. Eddie ended up getting a hot tag, but also got quickly cut off. We had Cornette taking shots at cosplay and midget wrestlers during this. Yes, he actually used the term midget, which, again, he will probably be hearing about on his social media page. So the match ended up breaking down toward the end. There was a spot toward the end of the match where Eddie went for a vertical suplex on Latimer, and, well, here's the best way I can explain it. He either horrifically botched the move, or Eddie is the greatest seller in the history of wrestling, because he epically fails at hoisting up Latimer for this move, and he basically collapses under himself and starts selling his right leg. And the only reason I presume that this is a clever cover-up on Eddie's part was that after this, he basically just sprung back up to his feet to hit a double clothesline spot with Isaacs. So all four guys did the big drop-down spot. Homicide got dumped to the outside onto Aldis. And then Latimer hit a pop-up powerbomb onto Kingston, followed by a full Nelson overhead German from Isaacs for the 3. And then after the bell, they had a very brief angle with Camille coming out while they played Into the Fire theme over everything, so we could not hear the conversation that her and Nick were having. And then the show just sort of ended with the whole locker room coming out and getting into a heated argument over stuff, I guess. Don't really have an explanation for that. Nor do I have an explanation for James Storm verbally threatening to forcibly remove Aldis's buttocks from his backside the next time he sees him, only to then get into a semi-heated argument with him at the end of the show. That was really weird. But, yeah, that was Powerrr for the week. And to keep with the theme of how I felt about most segments this week, this is a very weird and odd show, which I guess kept their theme of titling the show More Questions Than Answers. I don't really know, though. I'm all for a slow burn story progression, especially in a business now where we just see things sporadically happen or get blown off way too quickly with no fanfare or build-up. See WWE and AEW a lot of weeks. But something about the delivery of a lot of the segments this week just didn't come off as well as they probably intended. There were some really awkward cutaways. The layout and the dialogue of a lot of the talent was really strange. And to be honest, that's probably why I didn't enjoy this one as much. One of the best aspects about this show week in and week out is the promo delivery. And truth be told, aside from the Nick Aldis promo before the main event, the promo action was just really not on point this week. So, I don't know. It was just not really my cup of tea here. I know they can't all be winners, but this is definitely the first week watching this program where I kind of felt underwhelmed after watching. And not that the show was bad or anything, just, compared to the first 5 episodes, this one just felt weaker in execution than the others. Try again next week and hope for the best is all I can ask for. All right, moving on here. AEW Dynamite from November 13th, 2019. They had a nice video recap of the pay-per-view from Sunday. Also a nice added touch, they did not show a replay of the Moxley Omega Lights Out match, given that it was an unsanctioned match. So, they have an update on Omega's status following the match. He's being checked out by a doctor, tells Kenny that he's not cleared to wrestle yet, and Kenny asks about Moxley, to which the doctor informs him that he's pretty banged up, but he is cleared. And, Kenny was quite sad at this news. We then get Jon Moxley versus Michael Wakazaka Mike. They had a very short squash match deal. Moxley won with the Death Rider. And afterwards, he cuts a promo. He delivers an excellent one-liner, just going, hey, so that one counts, right? Says that he did exactly what he promised he was going to do at the Full Gear pay-per-view and that Kenny Omega will never be the same again. Says that he respects Omega because he has the balls to face Moxley one-on-one. Says that nobody in the locker room wants to face Moxley and that he is on a pilgrimage to lay out each member of the roster until he is the last man standing. Says that if anyone wants to face off with Moxley, they can let him know, but the catch is that they should kiss their families goodbye, have an ambulance on speed dial, and do not expect apologies out of Moxley when he's finished with them. Have I ever mentioned how great this show can be when they actually give guys promo time every week? In fact, do you ever notice that the best moments that usually come out of these Dynamite programs are the promos and the angles, as opposed to their actual TV matches every week? Interesting how that works out. Dark Order versus the Jurassic Express. I guess they have dropped the first name for Grayson. Can't say I blame them. Not that there isn't anything more intimidating than the name Stu or anything. So they had pretty much every Marco stunt match you've ever seen. He did some very overly choreographed lucha stuff on the heels for a while, which I'll never be able to take seriously. Marco got cut off and worked over forever. Jungle Boy eventually got a great hot tag at the end and ran wild. And in the finish here, Jungle Boy went for the suicide tope onto Grayson and Uno, but they caught him and took him out with a double super kick. And then Dark Order hit whatever that gory bomb senton finisher is they always hit. I still forget the name of it. Afterwards, they did this angle where Dark Order tried to recruit Marco into their cult by handing him one of the creeper masks. Marco was about to put it on, but Jungle Boy ran in and ripped it away. He handed him the Luchasaurus mask, or something resembling a dinosaur mask. I guess that's his own custom mask. Anyway, the heels ganged up on Jungle Boy and Marco for a minute. The fans are wildly chanting for Luchasaurus by this point, and pretty soon he did make his return here by laying out the creepers, and eventually Grayson as well. And I'll admit, Luchasaurus coming back and laying out the Dark Order and then posing with Jungle Boy and Marco stunned into the hard cam was pretty cool. I still think Marco is completely futile in this trio and is very miscast for this role, and I will never be able to watch a Marco stunt match and believe anything he does offensively. But for what it was, I thought it was fine. And the Luchasaurus return did get a big reaction out of everyone, so that was fine. I don't know if he's already cleared to wrestle. I mean, the way he was moving, it didn't seem like he was all 100% yet. I mean, they actually gave him the Hulk Hogan treatment here, where they just had dudes run into him so that he didn't have to be so mobile during the beatdown. So, guess we'll have to wait on the announcement of whether or not he's ready to go. If he is, great. And the sooner Marco can go back to being in a subordinate role for the group, the better. It was at this point where the show hit a major lull for about a half hour, and probably my first time watching Dynamite, where I was strongly considering switching over to NXT for the rest of the night just because of how impatient I was getting. In a match that I am not making up here, Shawn Spears versus Peter Avalon versus Darby Allin. In other words, it is the Dirty Dutch Mantel approach from Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where you just pull 3 names out of a hat to figure out who's wrestling in a TV match. I've already been on record saying that I really don't like triple threats or multi-man clustered matches, and tie that in with them doing a random 3-way here with nothing at stake and none of these guys having prior history with one another. It just made the match come across as pointless, shall we say. They did some spots for a few minutes. I mean, the only real notable thing that happened early on was right at the beginning when Allin and Spears had a face-off and Peter went up top for a frog splash, but Allin and Spears just kind of moved out of the way. Joey Janela ran down and brawled with Shawn Spears to the back in very WWE fashion, might I add. He also had what I can only best describe as an epileptic seizure right before he leapt over the guardrail. Even JR could not confirm what this was on commentary, but for any of you that watched this show and saw Joey Janela's facial expression right before he chased off Spears, you know what I'm talking about. So Darby and Peter did some stuff for another minute, and then Darby won with a coffin drop. Afterwards, he got on the mic and accepted the challenge of Jon Moxley. At least it set up something for next week's show. It's about the only positive I can take away from it. Nyla Rose versus Danny Jordan. Another very short, uneventful squash. Crowd was absolutely dead for this match. Nyla won with a powerbomb. That's pretty much it. We then had a promo for the most WCW thing you have ever seen in your entire life. They announced that next week on the show, there's going to be a 12-man battle royal, otherwise known as the Dynamite Dozen, where the last 2 guys have a normal wrestling match to determine who gets to wear a diamond ring on their finger. Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, if this were like the Kurt Angle Open Challenges from years ago where he put his gold medals on the line, it'd be a lot different. I mean, I was at least smart enough to know at the time how much those gold medals meant to Kurt. This, on the other hand, I have no explanation. There was no announcement of why this diamond ring is prestigious. There was no video promo to build up said ring. There was no graphic. There There were no announcements of whom will be partaking in said experience. Nope, they're just like, hey, there's a gimmick battle royal next week where there's a ring on the line. And then JR very nonchalantly just goes, cool. So, pretty anticlimactic to say the least. After this, Tony Schiavone had an interview with Allie on the ramp. They talked about her being number 4 in the rankings of the women's division right now. How this is possible when Allie has never had a single match on AEW Dynamite, I have no idea, but just roll with it. It gets worse. So as they're cutting this promo, we get the official TV debut of Awesome Kong and Brandy Rhodes. Allie tries to charge at Kong, but Kong lays her out with a back fist. They then proceed to cut off a chunk of Allie's hair. And, this is how they treated their number 4 in the rankings for title contention. She was used as a storyline ploy to get over a crappy gimmick that is not over and no one cares about. Boy, what a TV debut for Allie, right? And it was at this point where I was like moments away from turning the show off in complete disinterest. Luckily, Chris Jericho and MJF were up next to save the show. So Jericho comes out and cuts a great heat promo with the crowd, spends a few minutes burying Cody and saying that Jericho proved that he really was an entitled millennial SOB the whole time. Says he's beaten everyone they've put in his path. This eventually brings out MJF, who used Cody's entrance theme. He cuts this dynamite heel promo, no pun intended. Talks about the fact that everyone should be relieved that MJF threw in the towel at the pay-per-view, because if he had not, everyone's hero, Cody, wouldn't even be wrestling anymore. Says that Cody's selfish and only cares about himself. And while the fans have been booing MJF, the fact is they've been cheering the real villain the entire time. Says that Cody basically used MJF as a pet project and tried to keep him tied up under his thumb. So he took care of the problem. And now MJF is the new face of AEW. So him and Jericho have this great back and forth. They're getting into this boiling argument over whether or not MJF wants to join the inner circle. And it all leads to Jericho asking who the biggest jackass in AEW is, to which both men simultaneously respond with Cody. And they let out this great belching laugh and they hug it out together. And this eventually brings out the real Cody to the ring and runs down and starts beating up Jericho and MJF. And as he does so, the debuting Wardlow comes in and lays out Cody. Hits a modified fireman's carry front slam onto him, followed by a deal where he choked out Cody with a tie. And his debut was met with such gravitas that Excalibur goes, "Is that Wardlow?" And JR responds by going, "I don't know, who's Wardlow?" And Excalibur's only response to the question is, "It is Wardlow." And, well, suffice it to say, JR was still very confused here. And I do not believe Tony Schiavone said a single word during this portion of the segment, probably due in large part to his equal level of confusion. So, that was that. I will say that the one thing I did not like about this skit, aside from the fact that it may have dragged on a little too long with the Jericho MJF comedy bit, did they ever announce whether or not MJF is now in the inner circle? I don't think they did. Yeah, they did their spiel with one another. They called Cody a jackass, and then Cody came out and got his revenge for a little bit before getting laid out by Wardlow. At no point was MJF given any kind of entry coronation, and at no point did the announcers ever specify or even ask a similar question. They just moved on with the show. So that was rather odd. And I guess it also begs the question of whether or not this would mean that Wardlow would be in the group, which would be dumb considering they already have a muscle in the group in the form of Jake Hager. Throwing Wardlow in there would completely negate Hager's role. So that was very open-ended. I would presume that MJF and Wardlow are just a duo. Whether or not this ties into their affiliation with Jericho's group or if they're going to be their own separate entities is yet to be determined. But honestly, I think MJF and Wardlow as a duo is just fine. I don't think either of them need to be in the actual inner circle group. Like I said, maybe as an affiliate or henchman or something like that, that could work. But I don't know. Just Something about them joining the Inner Circle right now in its current formation is just not really a fit. Pac versus Hangman Adam Page. Still trying to determine if I enjoyed this match more than their pay-per-view match or not. I will say that they had a more standard AEW match this go-around in comparison to their Full Gear match, in that they did a lot more moves. They also did a lot less selling than what they did at the pay-per-view, which I guess if you're really looking to nitpick this show, you could make the argument, well, why would they have a slower match at the pay-per-view and then be firing on all cylinders several days later when their bodies should be worn down? To which I really don't have an answer, aside from the fact that it's a small psychological element that they failed to take into account. Anyway, they had a great back-and-forth exchange toward the end. They do a deal in the corner where the ref tries to hold Page back, but Pac gets the jump on Page and starts punching him and kicking him in the head. And as Page stumbles to the ground, Pac stomps away on him, hits the Black Arrow, followed by a brutalizer for the ref stoppage. And they announced that Pac has now won the series. What this means for his future, I don't know. I know I was a pretty strong advocate of them wrapping up the feud with Page getting the win over Pac and Moxley getting the win over Omega. This way they could finish the Omega Pac program and then start a program with Moxley versus Page, possibly where the winner could be next in line for title contention. Now they're kind of in a weird boat where both of the heels have won their designated feuds, and considering that their current world champion is a heel, they're pretty much blowing their wad on all their babyface challengers right now. Plus they're now throwing a wrench into the mix with Moxley feuding with Darby Allin of all people. If that even is going to be a feud, I don't really know. I mean, they might just do a one-off next week and call it that. So I don't really know what's going on. Not that I don't think Pac versus Jericho couldn't work, but I'm just so accustomed to the traditional way of booking with the faces and heels, where if you have a heel champion, you're trying to build up babyface challengers to go after said heel champion. It's kind of hard to wrap my brain around the idea of heel versus heel right now. And the problems with doing Pac versus Jericho specifically is that if they did that program, Pac would absolutely be the clear-cut villain there. And what with Jericho working extremely hard every week to be hated by the fans, giving them an incentive to cheer for Jericho right now is probably not something I would advise. I guess we'll see, though. The main event world title picture is just really convoluted right now. I don't really know what they're going for. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just, I don't know. There's something about it that's just non-traditional and kind of out of my element. We then cut backstage to a brawl with the Bucks and Santana and Ortiz. They had a brawl. It's pretty much the only way I can sum it up. They're slamming each other into stuff. They're fighting into all these different areas. And in a moment that I coin as the term attempted comedy relief without the element of the comedy or the relief, Santana super kicks Nick Jackson into a bathroom door, and behind the door is standing Orange Cassidy with his hands in his pockets. And this was such a ridiculous spot that JR immediately no-sells it and talks about the main event tag title match. Anyway, they end up brawling for like another 5 minutes. Finally, security all run down and pull apart everyone. Bucks dropped the security with super kicks. Sorry, I got lost in my notes there. P&P end up breaking out the loaded sock and start whipping Nick and Matt with it. They wrap Nick's leg around one of the steel barriers by the entrance ramp and destroy his leg with the sock. Santana marks a giant white circle with spray paint on a gimmicked platform. Just as sure to let us, the viewers, know that this is a gimmicked platform that they're about to powerbomb Matt through. So they kill Matt with the powerbomb. Eventually, Brandon Cutler runs out and tries to cover up Nick, but P&P jump him. Finally, Private Party run out and get involved. And that is when security is able to actually restrain everyone. And it is also at this point, literally within seconds of this confrontation between Private Party and Santana and Ortiz, that they announce a graphic and a tag match for next week's show between the two teams. So they either have the fastest production crew in the world today, or they ill-timed the placement of this tag announcement on the show. They are also sure to inform us that Santana and Ortiz will be paying tribute to their friend Matt Travis, who, as a lot of you know, was tragically killed in a car accident in New York City this past weekend. And this tribute would actually feel like a real tribute if we were not intended to boo the two jagoffs of Santana and Ortiz for beating up the Bucks and nearly leaving them for dead in the previous segment. Seriously, am I the only one that thinks of this stuff? Or am I just reading too much into this? Like, how does no one think of this stuff in advance? Come on, guys. I'm not even that smart. SCU versus Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho for the AEW Tag Team Championships. Let me get my major criticism out of the way real quick. Justin Roberts is not Michael Buffer, nor will he ever be Michael Buffer. He needs to stop acting like Michael Buffer. They had a pretty good tag match, I thought. Nice to see four guys in AEW who actually know and understand the fundamentals of how to work an actual tag match. It also helped make the match more enjoyable for me. Sammy Guevara is actually growing on me quite a bit, and I can't tell if it's just the fact that him and Jericho have pretty good chemistry together or what, but they do this spot early on in the match where the faces are just out wrestling the heels, and Jericho goes over to hug the corner of the ring so that Guevara can tag, and Guevara's like, I got this, Chris, I got this. So he tags in. He immediately gets out-wrestled with arm drags from the baby faces, and as he's getting pulled over to SCU's corner, Guevara is reaching his arm out to try and tag in Jericho again. I thought that was great. It was a small, subtle thing, but it was extremely effective in the context of this match. So they do some more stuff for a while. Jericho trips up Kaz so that Guevara can get the heat on him. Guevara ends up missing a shooting star where he lands directly on top of his right knee. Sold it like he got hurt. I don't know if he did or not. Scorpio ends up getting the hot tag. He takes over a bit with a comeback, ends up breaking down toward the end. Jericho takes the ref so that Hager can pull Kaz out of the ring. Big near fall for the heels there. Guevara goes to tag in Jericho. And in a finish that I can merely describe as bittersweet, Jericho hits the code breaker for a near fall, and then Scorpio Sky small packages Jericho and pins him. So SCU retain. And I know I'll be in the minority here. I really don't agree with this finish for a variety of reasons. Number one of the cool things they had going with Jericho was that he was undefeated in singles and tag competition. And so there was always that lingering story of who's going to be the first guy to hand Jericho his first pinfall loss in AEW. And would that guy be next in line for a title shot because of it? And for some reason, they decided to give this spot to Scorpio Sky. And as talented as Scorpio is, even if they put this guy next in line for title contention, no one believes that Scorpio Sky is winning the world title. So it was kind of a situation where they just blew off a potential good story with no rhyme or reason. My second problem with it was that they didn't even build up to this in any way. I mean, the whole story was that Scorpio got a surprise fluke roll-up on Jericho, and, well, that was it. There was no drama building to it. The finish came pretty much out of nowhere, and as great of a job as Jericho did selling how miffed he was about it, the shock factor of it just didn't come off as well as they probably expected it to. I don't know. Maybe if you do this exact same match with this exact same finish in a few months after Jericho's racked up a few more wins in his arsenal, this might have come across better for me, but something about the timing and the placement of this just did not sit well with me. I thought they should have saved Jericho's first loss for another time. Now, the one thing I will say about it is that at least Jericho's first loss came at the hands of somebody holding a current championship. They've been telling a good story with Scorpio throughout the tag title tournament. Basically the idea that he didn't even know he was going to be wrestling in the damn thing until literally minutes before the first round match when Pentagon and Phoenix took out Daniels. So I can definitely see why some people are going to be okay with this finish and see it as logical. I'm not saying it wasn't logical. I just think they should have held off before doing it. It felt very rushed into. I think you could have milked Jericho's win streak a little bit longer before doing this. So, minor complaint, but I know there were a lot of people that liked the finish and thought it was great. I was kind of on the other end of the spectrum. I think it was blown off a little too quickly with not enough proper build-up. Anyway, that was Dynamite for the week. Overall, I would say that this was one of those shows where if I would have just watched the second hour and skipped the first altogether, I might have thought this was one of the better shows they've produced. Unfortunately, I watched the first hour, and that one left a lot to be desired. The Jurassic Express Dark Order match really didn't do anything for me, although I did like the Luchasaurus return and everything they did post-match. The Shawn Spears, Darby Allin, Peter Avalon three-way just felt very random and thrown together. I mean, it did build to an announcement of Allin versus Moxley for next week, which should be interesting. I still don't really get Darby Allin and what people see in him, but the dude has a reputation for killing himself to get over, almost literally speaking. So I guess we'll see there. The Nyla Rose squash was just kind of there, and I still have no idea what the hell they're going for with this Brandy Rhodes character, but it's pretty bad. Let's just put it that way. So, well, my opinion, skip hour 1 and just watch hour 2. The Jericho MJF promo skit was great. Pac versus Hangman Page was very good, even though the finish was a bit wonky. And if they were going to have a blow-off match here, I probably would have had Page go over. And the main event was a lot of fun. I still think it's too early to be beating Jericho, especially with the win streak he's been on recently, but at least if he was going to lose, it was to someone with a championship and someone they've been trying to build up on TV. So there you have it. Moving on with NXT from same date, November 13th, 2019. Angel Garza versus Lio Rush for the Cruiserweight Championship. Crowd was super hot for this match. They do this spot early on where Angel goes to tear off his pants in front of Leo's family ringside. Lio took advantage with a big flurry of offense. Goes for a suicide dive onto Garza, but he turns it into a power slam on the outside for the heat. There's this incredibly horrific-looking spot later on where Lio tries for the bottom rope stunner onto Garza, but Garza turns it into a drop kick, and you just see Leo's back fold up like a pretzel. Look absolutely brutal. They go back and forth, all kinds of near falls. Lio goes for the springboard stunner again, but gets caught with the wing clipper for a near fall. Everyone thought that was the finish, myself included. If I had one complaint about the actual stuff that they did in this match, there's a part later on where Garza takes about 6 years to set up a top rope wing clipper, which, well, it was stupid for a variety of reasons. Number one, no one expected Garza to actually execute this move. And two, it ended up taking a fast-paced style and pretty much grinded it to a screeching halt. Now, that said, I want to say this too, because I saw this during the Keith Lee-Roderick Strong match as well. I don't know what it is, but NXT has been really into doing this thing lately where they do these real dangerous-looking top rope moves, and the problem is that a lot of the time, the guys have to take like 30 to 60 seconds to properly set up whatever it is they're going to do. Be it a superplex, a powerbomb, a throw, what have you. The executions of the moves are normally fine. My problem is that guys take way too long to set these spots up. I counted during the Roderick Strong-Keith Lee match. I think it took Roddy almost a full minute to get Keith in place for a superplex and get him overhead for the top turnbuckle. I don't know, it felt like I went from watching a great match here to a momentary glimpse into the WWE Training Center. And the same thing happened in this Garza Rush match too. Garza's got Rush in the butterfly, and he's trying to climb up on the ropes while holding Rush, and he's slipping on the turnbuckles, he's losing his balance, he's struggling there to climb up. And all the while I'm sitting there watching like, is this really necessary? Like, do we really need to do this spot, especially if it's not even going to lead to the finish or anything? So that was my big criticism of this match. But it also tied in with some of my ongoing problems with NXT matches as of late. Anyway, Lio fights out with some headbutts and gets a sunset flip onto Garza. He hits the final hour on Angel for another near fall. And then Lio hits another final hour and gets the pin with Garza's feet onto the bottom ropes. This was a very fun match. The near falls did get kind of ridiculous toward the end there, and I've never really been a fan of the babyface going over in cheap fashion, unless he's going to turn heel at some point, which I don't think is something they're planning on doing. I guess I also didn't like the idea that Leo's first title defense also resulted in a cheap win. But I'll tell you what, I have not seen the Full Sail crowd this hyped from start to finish for an NXT match since Riddle versus Cole. So if you're looking for a hot match where everyone's pretty much on their feet from opening bell to the end, this is a match for you. They've absolutely got something with Angel Garza. I have no idea why the dude's a heel when he gets cheered throughout the majority of his matches, but in due time, I could see them giving Garza a monster push in NXT, provided Vince doesn't call him up beforehand. Xia Li versus Aaliyah. They had what I can merely describe as a relatively short yet inoffensive match. Aaliyah got a momentary bit of heat. They sort of got lost toward the end, which, judging how this match only went like 2 minutes, I have no idea how they could possibly forget what to do. Xia quickly cut her off, hit a roundhouse kick on Aaliyah, and pinned her. Also busted open Aaliyah's nose in the process, which is actually weird when I went back and watched it again, because I'm pretty sure Aaliyah ducked the first kick and then got her elbows up before Xia hit the kick on the second attempt. And even with Aaliyah trying to block the kick with her arms, she still ended up getting kicked right in the schnoz. So to quote what a great man once coined in the business, sorry about your damn luck, Aaliyah. This is definitely the one point of this week's show where I felt like I was watching a developmental version of NXT as opposed to the third brand extension. Up next, we had Finn Balor come out for a promo. Says that he used to be proud of NXT, but now NXT has become a joke. Says that Johnny Gargano is still favoring his neck from the 1916 DDT he took 3 weeks ago. Talked about how much better the show was before a bunch of boys moved in. He starts to talk about Matt Riddle, but pretty soon he comes in and jumps Balor from behind. They have a brief brawl on the outside until the Undisputed Era all come out to tell Riddle, wrong place, wrong time. This eventually brings out Keith Lee and Tommaso Ciampa to join the fight. And because the Undisputed Era is a great heel group, they back down from a 4-on-3 advantage that they themselves have, mind you. Of course, judging by the size of Keith Lee, I would not want to fight that dude at any man advantage I'd have. So then the segment gets awesome. Keith Lee gets on the mic, and he tells Cole that he's made a big impression on Raw and SmackDown by standing up to Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins, but he wants to know if Adam will stand up to him right now. This is then followed by Roderick Strong, the best old-school pea-brain heel in the world, informing us that Adam Cole is the most dominant force in WWE, and I quote here, in the last 2 weeks. Yes, not the last 2 months or the last 2 years. No, the last 2 weeks. He says that Adam Cole's been working hard. He deserves the night off because of how awesome he's been. He calls Keith a big dummy, which I laughed at. And if Keith wants a fight, he's going to have to go through Roddy. And then Keith opens up the ring for Roddy to step up. And it was at this point that I completely turned my opinion on Roderick Strong and declared him the best heel in the world today. It's actually night and day comparing him to where he is now compared to his Ring of Honor days. I never thought Roderick Strong was anything special in ROH years back, but him in NXT is a completely different tale. He is so much more tolerable as an insufferable prick than he is a white meat underdog babyface. And yeah, I don't even mean that as a personal criticism or anything, but like when I used to watch Roddy wrestle in ROH, the one thing I constantly nagged about was, man, this guy's a great worker, but he looks no different from your average Joe working behind the cash register at Walmart. He's got no personality. He's bland, no facial hair. He's got the most generic haircut in the world. He's got no promo ability. He's got a voice like you would hear in the early stages of high school puberty. Like, what does everyone see in this guy? And, well, it only took him, was it? He debut in ROH. Give me a sec here. I'm going to look it up. Roderick Strong. Just go to the Wikipedia page here. I don't even know why I'm taking time to do this right now. Give me a sec. So he debuted in 2003. and he turned heel in NXT in 2017. So, yeah, took a little under 2 decades for me to turn the corner with him, but Roderick Strong has completely changed my mind. If only Steven Crowder could hear me right now, he'd be so proud. I know I'm lingering on this a lot more than I probably should, but you know what the best part about this promo was? If you think about it for a sec, it really was not all that good, but Roderick Strong cutting awkwardly bad, old-school, nervous heel promos and calling Keith Lee stupid and a big dummy is so tremendously great for its own twisted reason. I now actually enjoy hearing Roddy cut promos every week because I just never know what the guy's going to say. All I know is that it's going to sound very weird in execution. So, he is great. We then get Keith Lee versus Roderick Strong, and they had a great big guy versus little guy match. Keith just beat on Roddy forever. Keith Lee has the best mean guy facial expression. Like, if you want a lesson on how to look if you're a big mean guy in pro wrestling, watch a Keith Lee match. He just tosses Roddy around the ring like a rag doll. They did this really cool shoulder tackle spot where Keith was on his knees and Roddy, like full force, tries to go into Keith with shoulder blocks, but he still can't take him down. He hits his fantastic double thrust slap onto Roddy's chest coming off the ropes. Roddy ends up cutting off Keith on the second turnbuckle, works him over for a while. Keith ends up grabbing Roddy's wrist and gives him a big series of clotheslines and beals for a big comeback. They end up building to this wicked superplex spot from Strong, which, as I noted earlier in the Garza Rush match, did take way too long for them to set up and execute. And I'm not even sure if Keith just wasn't comfortable taking the move or if Roddy had trouble getting him in position. All I know is that Keith is on the top rope forever, and Roddy's trying to climb up there and get Keith set up, but Keith just keeps shoving Roddy off. He does this like 2 or 3 times in a row. Eventually, I'm just like, so are we going to do this spot or not? Because this is kind of getting tedious now. So ultimately, Roddy hits the big superplex. Everyone goes crazy for it. They do a big strike exchange toward the end, which brings out Cole, Fish, O'Reilly, Riddle, and Ciampa to brawl. Riddle ends up getting taken out by Balor and drop kicking to the steps. And then in the greatest finishing sequence, Roddy gets the Olympic slam on Keith for a near fall. He tries to follow up with the running knee, but Keith rolls through, hoists up Roddy into the Supernova Fireman's Carry, and wins. So the heels immediately jump the faces afterwards, and that is when Dominik Dijakovic runs down and pretty much annihilates all 4 Undisputed Era guys single-handedly within seconds. It was pretty great. So Dijak and Ciampa have an exchange afterwards. Dijak tells him he's in. They shake hands. This is followed by a very intense face-off between Keith and Dominik, wherein, after scowling and nearly coming to blows, they end up shaking hands to resolve their tension with one another. And, well, it's weird because here's what we know. They announce later in the show that it is now going to be Balor versus Riddle as a replacement match for the Gargano match. So Riddle's been taken out of War Games. The problem, though, is that now leaves the babyface team of Ciampa, Lee, and Dijak at a disadvantage again. But, they're a week and a half out from the War Games show now, which means that next week, they're going to have to figure out who the 4th guy will be for the babyface team against the Undisputed Era. Unless they leave it up to a shock factor at the War Games show, which would be equally as cool. But the way I look at it right now, whoever they bring in as the final partner is going to feel very hastily thrown together. Not that they don't have enough babyfaces to cover for the final slot, they do. But it's like no matter who they bring in for that 4th guy, it's not going to feel like there was a whole lot of story build to it. Aside from a generic babyface running down to chase off the heels one final time and then tell Ciampa that he wants the final spot on the team. Now, that all said, I do like the idea of a Finn Balor-Matt Riddle singles match. I think that'll really add a nice layer to the overall card, and I think it would be incredibly stupid to leave Balor off that show altogether or just have him do some kind of run-in in the cage match at some point. So it's good to see that he's going to be actually wrestling on that show. I just wonder how they're going to find a way to explain who the last-minute replacement is going to be for Ciampa, Lee, and Dijak's team on the go-home show. It's just a weird position they're in right now. And all of this taking place because of his sustained neck injury from Johnny Gargano that we still don't really even have confirmation of how this came about. We can presume it was from the Finn Balor 1916 DDT on the steel ramp a couple weeks back, but who knows? I mean, that dude's been fighting through injury after injury lately, so might be something that's been building up over time. It sucks, but that's the situation we're in right now. After this, we cut to the parking lot where Marina Shafir, Jessamine Duke, and Candice LeRae are laid out in rather weird spacing. It's as if whoever attacked them not only laid out all three of them successfully, but then strewed their bodies within a 40-feet radius of each other. Why, I have no idea. It just was very odd. Isaiah Swerve Scott versus Bronson Reed. I do appreciate the idea that Reed now has gear that just reads thick on the front. Why the spelling is wrong, I couldn't tell you. So they do a drop-down spot early on where Reed just sits on top of Scott's back, which the crowd actually popped for. There's a spot later on where Reed teases a tombstone piledriver off of the top rope, which, suffice it to say, probably would not have ended well. I will say that I'm not a fan of them using the belly-to-back overhead piledriver for Reed if guys are just going to kick out of it. A move like that should not be a transitional move. It should absolutely be a finisher. Anyway, Reed tried for the sit-out splash, but Scott rolled out of the way and then hit the axe kick on Reed for the pin. Match was fine. I guess the one thing I really don't like about what they're doing with Scott or Reed thus far is that they've not really given any kind of backstory or character context to them. You know, so far they've just been out there doing matches every week. And while they've been fun, this was the one match where I just kept sitting there thinking, who's supposed to be the face and who's supposed to be the heel? You know, both guys have kind of gone back and forth with the face-heel dynamic for so long, I'm generally perplexed by it. So, I need more backstory here. Match was good, but they need more going on in the character department with these guys. They aired a Forgotten Sons video package. Take a wild guess as to what was said there. Pete Dunne versus Killian Dane. Match never starts. Damian Priest runs out and blindsides Dane from behind. They end up getting into a three-way brawl with Dunne, Dane, and Priest. Priest hoists up one of these security guards and tosses him onto everyone with a crucifix bomb. He hits a big senton dive on everyone and stands tall afterwards. So, this is a bizarre feud. Like, if you think about this in a nutshell, there's a current three-way feud going on with, of all people, Pete Dunne, Killian Dane, and Damian Priest. All of whom are feuding because I'm not even really sure, to be honest. All I remember is that Pete and Damian had a match. Killian attacked Pete for some reason. Then Pete and Damian had another match. Killian attacked Pete again. And then he attacked Damian because, well, he was just sort of in the way, I guess. And now they're all feuding because, well, they just are. I'm sure the match will be fun. If that's even the plan to do it at TakeOver, I don't really know. I just don't get what they're fighting over. And like I've said with the Killian Dane thing, I have no idea why he's fighting anyone in NXT. When did this guy show up again? Was it like week 1 of them on USA where Killian Dane just showed up and attacked Matt Riddle? Like, that's all the guy does. He shows up, he beats people up, and then he leaves. I mean, I guess when you look at that on the surface, it's like, well, he's just a brute. And it's like, okay, but why is he there? Why did Killian Dane return to NXT? I don't know. He just doesn't like people in NXT, so he's going to beat them up. Okay. Mia Yim has a promo backstage. Talks about the fact that she's open to the challenge of Raw and SmackDown women invading NXT. Says that Ciampa was right when he said that NXT was the main roster. And eventually Dakota Kai comes in and tells Mia that she knows things are very chaotic right now, but she just wants Mia to know that she has her back in the main event. Mia Yim versus Io Shirai in a ladder match for the team advantage at War Games. So, I guess the best way I can sum this up looking back is, while I wouldn't say that the bulk of the match was thrilling or anything, it was not bad. Like, it wasn't good, but at least they were not out there killing themselves. Then the last 5 or so minutes happened. There's a spot where Mia goes to pick up the ladder, and Io is on the apron setting up for a springboard dropkick. And I don't know what the hell happened here. Well, actually, I do know what happened. Mia had the ladder too close to her face, and the ladder collided on the bridge of her nose and busted her open. So Mia's bleeding all over the place. Trainers are in there with a towel to stop the blood. They're doing everything they can to kill some time. Io's just kind of awkwardly crawling around, talking to Jessica Heiser, the official, like, what do I do? So eventually Mia gets back in it. They did some spots for a few more minutes. Eventually Mia's on the outside and Dakota runs down. Io hits a moonsault onto both of them. She then tries to scale the ladder, but Dakota cuts her off with a powerbomb. Mia ends up getting back in and takes out Io. And as Mia tries to scale the ladder, Kaylee Ray runs down and takes out Dakota. Yes, Kaylee Ray from NXT UK debuts here, which was rather random. And she shoves the ladder over. Mia goes crashing through a gimmick ladder on the outside, which was disgusting and brutal in every possible manner. I guess Mia's okay afterwards, but watching the replay several times, it looked like she damn near got killed taking this bump. It was a cool spot. I just thought it was very unnecessary. And, well, then Io climbed up and grabbed the contract. So in a foregone conclusion that everyone could see coming because it is War Games and we all know how this match works, the heels have the team advantage for the women's cage match. I've read a lot of reports out there from people comparing this match to the Omega-Moxley match from the pay-per-view. And to tell you the truth, that's not even my primary concern with this whole thing. Why was this even a ladder match to begin with? If the idea was that they were fighting for a contract or a piece of documentation that had the words team advantage printed on it, why does that automatically equate to them having a ladder match to determine it? You know, why not just do like a normal singles match and avoid any potential for your wrestlers to get severely injured taking stupid, unnecessary ladder bumps? You know, especially when I look at all the stuff that's been going down the last few weeks with talents getting hurt, and them having to shift around the War Games card to accommodate for these injuries. Like, I have no idea why you would put yourselves at an even greater risk for these wrestlers to get hurt by putting them in these gimmick matches where evidently guys and girls are going to take stupid, insane bumps to try to get the match over. Like, I just think, you already had to reshuffle around the Johnny Gargano match because of the neck injury. Mia Yim got busted open here after a botched ladder spot, and she nearly killed herself taking a completely unnecessary fall off of the ladder through another ladder on the outside. Like, why are we doing these dangerous matches when the War Games show is next week? And to think, now they're doing another ladder match next week with the guys to determine the team advantage between Adam Cole and Dominik Dijakovic. Do you think those guys are going to hold back in that match? No, of course not. They're going to destroy their bodies and take completely gratuitous falls right before they have to work a cage match several days later. On top of the fact that Cole is wrestling with a bad wrist. Like, I have no idea what their thought process is right now. Like, this is the kind of stuff TNA used to do back in the day. What's that? Oh, we got a cage match coming up in several days? All right, let's do 2 street fights, a ladder match, a First Blood Inferno Buried Alive match where the object is to set your opponent on fire and then bury them 10 feet under the ground. All on the go-home show, by the way. I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. You know, all the while, if they just booked an Adam Cole-Dominik Dijakovic singles match to determine the man advantage, you know, at least we wouldn't have to worry about guys getting severely injured by doing risky spots with ladders several days before the pay-per-view. So, like I said, I don't know what the mindset is. Also, I guess I should mention that Bayley ran out and jumped Shayna Baszler before the show ended. Yeah, that was a thing. And yes, for the record, Bayley was an instantaneous star when she showed up for all of 20 seconds, because this is NXT, where anyone that was a previous star on the show is a megastar when they show up, but on the main roster, they're just dudes and dudettes on the roster. So that was NXT. I'm probably in the minority here, but regardless of what the ratings indicate otherwise, I've been enjoying NXT's product a whole lot more than AEW lately. Yeah, particularly this week, I found myself engaged in this show more. The Cruiserweight match was absolutely great. The Keith Lee Roderick Strong match was a lot of fun. The story build-up of the War Games match is intriguing. And while I know it definitely wasn't their initial plan for War Games, yeah, they're definitely doing a pretty good job trying to do last-minute scrambling to put that card together. And so, minor gripes on the show aside, I still think NXT is a much easier show to watch. And for anyone wondering, I do not have an anti-AEW bias or anything. I'm giving you my honest take after 7 weeks of watching these programs. NXT is just keeping my interest more. So, take that for what it means. And once again, everyone, thanks for watching. Keep posted with our 2 weekly uploads on the FSWR channel by clicking that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that little bell icon too. Very important that you get notified of all the video uploads each week. Also, I'd like to get your feedback on all 3 of these shows if you watched. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what show you thought was the best, what was your favorite match, least favorite match. Anything you have to add, feel free to chime in down below. And with that, I will see you all this coming Monday for the news edition of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report.